Welcome to the Capital News. I am your host, Alex Commodities. Today is January 9th, 2020. Thank you so much for joining me. Hope everyone out there is doing well today. The title of today's podcast is Fed Up Yet? We got some news coming out of from the Federal Reserve, some remarks coming out in regards to repo operations and what they're going to be doing there. No surprise to anybody who's been paying attention here at the Capital News what they're going to be doing. We predicted this months ago, so we were prepared for this. We're going to get to that. But before we get to some of that economic news, I do want to talk about the Boeing airliner that crashed in Iran. That was pretty much one of the focal points on a lot of the mainstream media today. So I want to talk about this because this is still something that took place in the fog of war, if you will. There are different stories out there. Here in the U.S., the mainstream media and U.S. officials are pushing the narrative that this airliner did not crash, but rather that it was shot down by mistake, and I stress the word mistake, by Iranian forces, thinking that this airliner was not a jet, but that it was a missile attack or some sort of countermeasure by American forces in response to the Iranian retaliation where they lobbed missiles at two Iraqi Air Force bases that house U.S. troops. So American media, Western media for that matter, because we're getting the same thing from Canadian sources, from British sources. These people, these countries are all aligned. Surprise, surprise. So we're not going to know what the truth is here. I believe this, that we're not going to know the full story. Perhaps this is the case. Perhaps this is the truth, that this airliner was mistakenly shot down by Iranian forces. Of course, we were told that evening, because we do these podcasts later in the evening, so we had this breaking news during this podcast, that the Iranians were saying, oh no, this was an engine malfunction, and this happened shortly after takeoff. Well, Boeing airliner, especially the 737, crashing shortly after takeoff is consistent with those previous two airline crashes that Boeing has sustained through 2018, which caused the grounding of the 737 MAX 8. Now, this plane that went down was a 737, but it was not a MAX. Okay, that was not the version because those airlines have been grounded. So I said at the time of that podcast, I said, we're not going to know. We're not going to know, especially immediately after the fact. You have investigations that take place, and sometimes those investigations take months, if not years, to complete. So, again, when you're in a conflict, if you're in a war, the first casualty is always the truth. So, was it engine malfunction? Was it a pilot error? Was it the plane itself? Or was it a missile? And the question then becomes, if it was a missile attack from the Iranians, was it by mistake? Or is this the narrative that is being pushed out there? Because if it was on purpose, well, then how could we not respond? So instead of going from de-escalation, and I have my concerns that I voiced yesterday on the real de-escalation, that would cause an escalation. Because I'm still wary of the de-escalation. Because given President Trump's speech yesterday morning in regards to de-escalation attempts, it was continuing to call the Iranians basically terrorists. The Iranians continue to call us terrorists. Again, one man's patriot is another man's terrorist. He continues to go after the Obama administration. He continues to say, oh, well, it's de-escalation, but we'll still attack you. We'll still come after you. It's de-escalation, but we're going to up the ante when it comes to economic sanctions. So I remain skeptical of a long-term de-escalation and something that resorts and turns into some sort of progressive negotiation for peace. I hope that's the case. I truly do. This podcast is about peace and prosperity, the freedom philosophy, free market economics, basically the ideals of America in a nutshell. That's what this podcast is about. I hope we can come to that conclusion, but I remain very skeptical. And we went through that. We outlined some of the history, the deep history that has been between these two nations, Iran and the United States of America. And I do have to give credit because I was flipping through the channels, or maybe it was on my Twitter feed, And I did see Chris Matthews of MSNBC. He actually mentioned 1953. He actually mentioned Iran and Mohammad Mossadegh, the democratically elected prime minister in the 1950s in Iran, and how that led up to 1979 with the rise in the power of the Ayatollahs, which we're still dealing with. You have to look at both sides, folks. I'm not an apologist for the Iranians, and I'm not an American who sanctions my government and allows them to do what they do. But I'm one voice, and I can only do so much. I can write my letters to the president, which I've done. I can write my letters to my congressmen and to the senators, which I've done, and I voiced those here with this audience. There's only so much we can do. But it has to be peaceful, it has to be civil, and that's the way you got to go about it. And hopefully we can change the course of history one letter at a time, one podcast at a time, educating one person at a time, because that's what we have to do here. Because they want to fix the narrative that best fits the story that gets them what they want. If the narrative fits, that's what they're going to do when it can lead us to war. If it's the narrative that fits, that can lead the Federal Reserve to go unchecked, then that's what they're going to say. Any excuse they can come up with, that's what they're going to peddle. It's about them. It's about the system. It's not about you. It's not about the people of this country. It's not about the people around the rest of the world. The powers that be don't care. They don't care. They look at individuals and human beings as commodities, not human beings. And that's why so many people around the world are sick and tired of it. They have hit their breaking point, and that's why we have global protests. This is not coincidental. This is not accidental. This is what happens when people have been turned into commodities, when they are not respected as human beings, when they are not respected as mothers and fathers, brothers and sisters, as human beings. You're just a commodity. You're just a rear end for any seat. Punch in, punch out. We have the technology. We're going to come over. We're going to extract it from your country. We're going to put you into squalor. You're going to live under terrible working conditions. We're not going to pay you, and you're going to be happy about it. Well, that doesn't jive. That's not going to work. You might be able to get away with it if that's your angle for a little bit, but then it's just going to be a matter of time where people reach their boiling point and they're willing to die for a cause greater than themselves. That led to the founding of this country. It led to the uprising in Iran against the British firms and companies that were over there extracting their oil. It led to the first democratic government in Iran with the election of Mohammad Mossadegh, only to be overthrown in a coup orchestrated by the British, carried out by the United States of America in the 1950s, not in 1979. So you think they're just going to sit there and say, well, okay, they got it. It's not how it works. People understand this. They remember this. There was some footage that was on the mainstream media in regards to all of this escalation over the past couple of weeks, where you have people in Iran burning flags. Of course, one of them is an American flag. One of them was the Israeli flag. Of course, you understand that. But then you also have the Union Jack there, the British flag. Why would they do that, I wonder? Well, if only you went back to 1979, you wouldn't know. But if you understand what took place in the 1940s, 1950s, you would have a better understanding as to why they were burning that flag as well. And despite all of this, and despite all of the interactions, and despite all of the foreign meddling that the United States has engaged in over the past 60 years, and very heavily over the past 20, the Iranian people still do admire the United States, if you can believe that. But now, given these recent escalations, given these recent attacks and assassinations, now it's going to put people deeper into their respective silos as well. And people who might have been on the fence, yes, I want to protest our government, but now we're under attack. So do I stay patriotic just for this cause? Now we got to fight the United States and Western powers. Or do I abandon ship entirely and go with the West? What do I do? What do I do? You know, these global protests, again, they're organic. They're real. They're real. I've been saying here for months, these are not transitory. They're history in the making. The question is, how much coverage do they get on the mainstream media? Well, here in the United States, not that much. Is it any surprise why? Because maybe people in this country will start scratching their heads. They'd wake up from their Prozac comas and they say, oh my God, the same thing is happening here in the United States of America. And if the people, some of the poorest people on the planet, have the nerve and the audacity to take to the streets and go up against a government that is armed and willing to kill them, then why can't I do that here in the streets of our capitals in Washington, D.C. and elsewhere? It's no surprise. It's not just what they tell us, it's what they don't tell us. You know, it might be interesting to hear some of this on the global protests when it comes to, oh yeah, it's the top of the hour, it's the bottom of the hour, we're going to talk about it for 2 minutes and that's it. How much news coverage do you see on these protests in the mainstream media? Not that much. You think that's by accident? Or do you think it's on purpose? Let me give you a hint. It's on purpose. Because if you understand the media industry, and again, this is also in our book, The Cynic's Guide to Investing, we talk about this because it's a consolidation. There's only 6 or 7 major media corporations in the United States. You think they're on the same wavelength? You think they all know each other? You think they all play golf at the same country club? Of course they do. You think they all show up to the same parties? Of course they do. Of course they do. And this isn't some conspiracy theory. All you got to do is flip through the channels, which I've asked this audience to do. Turn on Fox. Yeah, you're going to get a different angle. Turn on MSNBC. Yeah, you're going to get a different angle. But guess what? They're talking about the same exact stories, aren't they? The same exact ones. 7.5 billion people on this planet, and they're talking about the same stories. And it's not as if the news is only on for 1 hour for the day. It's 24/7. So that's the best you can do. It's all about propaganda. It's all about formulating that narrative that suits their ends. It's all an illusion. This country has been hijacked years ago. Years ago. It's divide and conquer. They pull, I mean, look, what's that saying about voting? If it was that important, they wouldn't let us do it. Or if it was that effective, they wouldn't let us do it. That's a true statement. That's a true statement. There's no great difference between a Republican or a Democrat. You can pull up one quote from somebody 20 years ago and now up, the other party's in power, now you're a hypocrite. You can play this game all day long on both sides. When is it going to end? When is somebody going to stand up and say enough's enough? Because I was watching a clip this evening on CNN, and they had a Republican congressman on there. I can't remember his name, but he was one of the ones who was on the House Intelligence Committee. He's a Republican, and he was questioned about an earlier interview in which Representative Doug Collins, another Republican, who was he's the ranking member on the House Judiciary Committee, who has obviously been very much entangled with this impeachment. But he made a comment in regards to the Democrats loving terrorists. And this congressman was asked by Aaron Burnett on CNN this evening, is that okay for Representative Doug Collins to make that comment, to say that Democrats love terrorists? Is that okay? And that was a softball. That was a softball for this congressman to say, no, it's not. It's wrong. 100% wrong. And he needs to issue an apology. This is what's wrong with the country. We're putting politics and party above country. That's the problem. This was a softball. Doesn't get any easier than that. And how did he answer it? He diverted and said, well, Democrats say this, Democrats say that. It's like, that's not what you were asked, pal. Is it okay? When is somebody going to step up to the plate and be a man and be a leader? Or be a woman? I don't care. You understand what I'm saying? Where is the leadership? When is somebody going to say that's wrong? Well, guess what? When you have that type of rhetoric coming from our elected officials, and when you have that type of rhetoric coming from the Oval Office, the fish rots from the head down. That's the leadership. So people think they're fine with saying this stuff. Nobody wants to step up and say apologize and move beyond this, because we have real issues in this country. And it's not just issues that are consequences that will affect us in the United States of America, but it's going to affect people around the world, because that's how powerful our nation is. That's how big our economy is. That's how much of an influence we have on the rest of this planet. Rightly or wrongly doesn't make a difference. That's the reality of it. So with that comes massive responsibility. And with the fact that we are so divisive, that it comes from the White House itself, where he's had nothing but opportunity. He's on Twitter all the time. He has control as to what comes out of his mouth when he's on camera. He has complete control as to what his thunder thumbs are tweeting. But he chooses. He makes a choice to either go divisive or encouraging. Most of it's divisive. Most of it's propaganda. I'm not appreciative of this because this is not constructive, it's destructive. And it's one political rally after the next. It's a witch hunt, it's a hoax, it's this, that, and the other. We got to get above and beyond this. Otherwise, nothing's going to be solved because, quite frankly, there isn't much that is being solved. You know, you want to pat the president on the back for having tax cuts, that's fine, but what about the $1 trillion deficits that we now have as a result of that because he didn't cut spending? Where are my fiscal conservatives on that? Where are all of the fiscal conservatives who are supposed to be advocates for free trade? No tariffs. Where's that? Where are the fiscal conservatives and the Republicans defending the farmers who have gone bankrupt? Where are the fiscal conservatives and the Republicans coming out denouncing bailouts to all of these farms? And most of the farms that are getting it are corporate farms, not the mom and pop farms, not the family farms, because those are the ones that are going bankrupt. Are you okay with this? I'm not. And on top of that, we have the Chinese trade delegation coming here next week for the fantastic signing ceremony. Do you know the details of this miraculous Phase 1 deal? Crickets. Yeah, you don't know. Nobody does. But it's supposed to be the best thing ever. President Xi allegedly does not have his name on this entire thing. He is not coming over unless there's going to be some big surprise. He's not coming. It's Vice Premier Li He. He's coming over. He's going to sign it. It's supposed to take place in Washington, D.C., I imagine in the White House, probably in the Oval Office. There'll be a signing ceremony. Li He and Donald Trump. No President Xi. His name isn't even on it. So how great of a deal is this really going to be? When is Phase 2 going to start? We don't even know what's in Phase 1. Okay? We don't even know. But I imagine we're going to hear about great things in Phase 1, and we're going to hear about great things with Phase 2. You cannot make it up. So that'll be next week, I think on the 15th, which I believe is a Wednesday. So we'll look out for that. We have, now we'll get to some of these, the market performance here. We have the Dow Jones Industrial Average gaining 200 points, up 0.7%. The S&P 500 up 21 points, up 0.6%. The NASDAQ 100 gaining 74 points, up 0.8%, making all-time highs here, intraday closing as well. Again, pedal to the metal, and a lot of this now, some of the headlines that are going to be out there, the narrative that is going to be pushed out there. Well, we got the trade deal, which we knew about, so I don't know why that's anything new, and there's no details, so what's that but a bunch of BS? And then you have this alleged de-escalation. We still don't know about that, but hopefully that's the case. We have crude oil pulling back significantly over the past couple of days, so WTI is trading at $59.20 a barrel. Brent is at $65.30 a barrel. Remember, WTI was gaining on $65 a barrel, and Brent was nearing $70. So a big pullback over the past couple of days. Natural gas, the world is awash in it. Here in the East Coast here of the United States, basically, we're going to get 50s and 60-degree temperatures here over the weekend. So the supply and demand functionality of this is just lower prices for the foreseeable future, unless there's some major cold spell or major disruption when it comes to supply. But the globe is just awash in this stuff, believe me when I tell you. We have gold and silver also pulling back significantly over the past couple of days. Obviously, that was a flight to safe haven when it came to all of the escalation. Now there's seemingly somewhat of a pullback and de-escalation, so you see the same thing with that price action. We have gold sitting at $1,549 an ounce. Silver is at $17.83. So we'll keep you posted on those updates. Again, I'm still a strong advocate and believer that the precious metals markets are in a bull run, a multi-year bull run, and it is something that I think is just prudent diversification as well. So do your homework, do what's best for your portfolio, but I do suggest you take a hard look at the precious metals and do what's best for you. Some global headlines. We have Australian services PMI dipping into contraction. This number has declined to 48.7 in December from 53.7 a month earlier. Recall That number 50 is our break even. Anything above 50 is expansion. Anything below 50 is contraction. 48.7, and this is in the services side of the Australian economy. However, a little bit of good news for the Australians. Australia retail sales surged on Black Friday. Retail sales in Australia rose by 0.9% month over month in November of 2019, easily beating market estimates of a 0.4% increase. So that, to me, I mean, it's good news. We'll take it, but it's not surprising. It was the holiday shopping season. It was Black Friday, so that should really not come as much of a surprise. We have Thailand consumer sentiment dropping to an over 5.5-year low, so that's not a good headline. We have Malaysia industrial output growth at a 5-month high, so that's some good news out of Malaysia. We'll see if that trend sustains itself. We have Indonesian retail sales growth easing to 1.3%, so negative trajectory there. The Philippines imports drop for the 8th straight month. Not good news. And you also have Philippine exports shrinking as well. So we are far from greatness. The global economy is still slowing down. This is due to debt saturation the world over. That's why this title of today's podcast is Fed Up Yet, because we have news from the Federal Reserve. One of the bank presidents, I believe it was Clarita, came out and said, this whole repo stuff where the Federal Reserve is intervening in markets on a nightly basis to the tunes of tens, if not hundreds of billions of dollars. Oh, yeah, it was supposed to be temporary. It was supposed to be a one-off back in September. We expanded it ever since. It was supposed to be done in January. We might have to extend it through April. That would take us through the first quarter of 2020. Folks, can you say rigged? Can you say fake? Can you say fraud? Because that's exactly what this is. That's why these markets keep going up. It's not the bogus trade headlines, although they do have a little bit of an impact. It's not the bogus tweets that come out of Thunder Thumb's account. Yeah, it might have a little bit of a headline thing, but that's about it. The real meat and potatoes of this whole thing, it's the Federal Reserve, pumping in billions of dollars on a nightly basis. So where's the questions? Where are the real hardline journalists and investigative reporters looking into this and asking hardball questions of these Federal Reserve officials? Not to be found. Well, that takes us full circle to what we just spoke about a couple minutes ago with the media. There's only a handful of companies. They all know each other. They're all pushing the same narrative. That's why there's nobody with a backbone to ask Jay Powell, what the hell is going on? You guys don't know what you're doing, do you? Why are you pumping tens of billions of dollars on a nightly basis into these markets? What's going on? Oh, they don't know. And if they do know, they're not going to tell us. They're not going to give us the truth. It's an institution that shouldn't exist in the first place. But if it is going to exist, they better damn well tell us the truth. Of course, they're not going to. They're going to make something up. Because this was supposed to be temporary. It was expanded, and now it appears it's going to be expanded once again through April. This should come as no surprise to this audience, especially those who've been with me for quite a while, because we predicted this months ago. We have our Capital economics presentation back in July, I believe it was, saying central banks are trapped, and they're going to have to put the pedal to the metal if they want to continue playing the game that they have been playing for the past decade. And lo and behold, that's exactly what we have been witnessing. It was not temporary, and it's not going to be temporary. The question is, what are they masking? The question is, why can't they leave the repo market and go back to market forces? Well, one reasonable speculation would be because the rates would get out of hand again. Overnight lending would not be at the federal funds rate of 1.25%, 1.5%. No, it would spike. 5%, 6%, 8%, maybe even 10%. And that's not out of the realm of possibilities because we witnessed that last year, those types of spikes. And what that tells us, ladies and gentlemen, those are market forces at work. Trying to say, no, if you're going to lend me money on an overnight basis, pal, you want my money, you got to pay for it. 1.5%, 1.75%, it ain't going to cut it. It's not enough. I need 5%. I need 6%. I need 10% if I'm going to lend to you on an overnight basis. That's reasonable speculation as to what's taking place, as to why the Federal Reserve cannot leave this market. Because they have a printing press. They can just put buttons on a screen, boom, that's it, it's there. You can't do that. You can't print money. You do, they're going to lock you up and throw away the key. But they get away with it. And who do you think they're bailing out? Their buddies. All of these zombie corporations that exist. And some of them could be household names. I'm sure there's a lot of these corporations who are engaged in fraudulent accounting, or at least very questionable accounting, just to make things look better than what they actually are. Zombie corporations staying alive does nobody except those managers, those executives, any favors. It's not doing the economy any favor. Does it suck to lose a job? Sure it does. But you think this is all going to end well. And the further they kick this can down the road, the bigger the problem is going to be. So the Federal Reserve is putting the pedal to the metal. At least from one Fed official, this thing can continue through April. You can't trust them on anything. Because through 2019, they were supposed to continue with quantitative tightening. That was on autopilot. And they were supposed to continue hiking interest rates. Didn't happen. It's the complete opposite of that. Complete opposite. They cut rates 3 times. They're embarking on quantitative easing, although we're not supposed to call it that. So it was a complete 180. So basically do the opposite of what they say. Well, it's temporary. No, it's permanent. Now we're going to be on hold. Nah, we have a bias towards cutting interest rates even further. And then you got the idiots Ben Bernanke and Janet Yellen coming out. Oh yeah, you could go into negative rate territory. There's nothing wrong with that. Why don't you ask the Japanese and the Europeans how negative rates are working for them? Why don't you ask all of those pensioners and retirees over there how that's working for them? Why don't you ask all of those pension fund managers how that's working for them? And of course, Thunder Thumbs wants that here in the United States as well. Negative interest rates. This audience knows what that means. You shouldn't tolerate that for a second. You should be fuming when you hear the leader of the free world make such an idiotic and careless and reckless comment. Give me that money. Remember that? Give me that money. I want that money. It's yours. That's your money. Instead of gaining a coupon payment from the U.S. Treasury, you're paying the Treasury. Don't you pay the Treasury enough in your hard-earned tax dollars? Now Thunder Thumbs wants more of it? And for what? So it can juice the stock market, so he can pat himself on the back. That's the world in which we live. And then we have a survey out by Deloitte, and Deloitte is one of the largest consulting firms in the world. So they got their pulse on a lot of things. Did a survey of CFOs, and the vast majority, and I'm talking 80 plus 90% of CFOs are claiming that in 2020 we are either currently in a recession or there will be one this year. So no question that there is a global slowdown taking place. And I told you it's the C-suite, it's the CEO, the CFO, Chief Operating Officer, the board, all those guys and gals. They know what's going on. They're the ones running the numbers. And these guys know that they are going to be cutting back on capital expenditures, which will be a big hit to GDP, and they are going to start cutting back on headcount, which we're already seeing. We're already starting to see a sizable uptick in continuing jobless claims. So that also is a leading indicator. Remember, I've said this multiple times. Hours leads bodies. So if hours start to get cut, it's just a matter of time before the individuals, those employees, start to get laid off as well. This really couldn't come at a worse time, politically speaking, for Donald Trump, and that's why he continues, I think, with all of this, pretty much pump and dump scheme of just saying everything's fantastic, the stock market's making all-time highs, even though most Americans don't own stocks. Doesn't matter. It's a confidence game, and if you're a confidence man, that means you're a con man, and that's the game that's being played here. I would rather much appreciate truth and honesty, because that's what the world needs right now. It needs leadership. It needs honesty. And that's not what we're getting from the White House, unfortunately, on a whole host of things. And again, I am not picking on Donald J. Trump, but he's the man in charge. He's the president of the United States. If this was Barack Obama, I'd be going at him too. If this was Bush, it doesn't matter who it is. I don't care if you're a Republican or a Democrat. I'm concerned about the truth. I'm concerned about legitimate leadership. I'm concerned about a legitimate plan that's going to lead us and hopefully the rest of the world through our leadership to peace and prosperity. I don't think I'm asking for too much. Again, I stated this yesterday, the whole thing with the United States of America, at least idealistically speaking, and it should take place in practice too, because it's really not that difficult, people, is to understand what freedom is, and that freedom requires tolerance. You might not like your neighbor, doesn't mean you got to go next door and vandalize his property or beat him up. Same thing with people on the opposite side of the planet. You don't like the religion, you don't like how they pray, you don't like how they dress, yada, yada, yada. It doesn't mean you got to bomb them. Doesn't mean you have to stage a coup. Doesn't mean you can't find common ground. Because it's these same people who want to be the tough guys who are the ones who stay home and send young people to go die. Where's, tough guy Lindsey Graham? At least get in the jet, at least get in the F-35 or whatever we got, F-16s, F-35s, whatever they are, F-22s. At least get in the jet and drop the bomb. Do something. Don't just stay behind your cozy desk in the Senate with your cozy six-figure salary that is taxpayer funded and send somebody else over there to die. That pisses me off to no end. You have no idea. Because you're not a tough guy. I couldn't even imagine people who've seen war who would want that on anybody. I'm not a pacifist. If we're attacked, okay, it's legitimate. But, all of this hardline stance, it's led to trillions of dollars that we don't have being spent. It's led to hundreds of men and women being killed, thousands being wounded. A lot of our veterans coming home and committing suicide, ending up homeless, ending up addicted to drugs. Our hearts should be weeping for these people. We've sent them off to fight and die, and they don't even know what for. I don't even know what for. And I don't think you do either. Because there's no endgame strategy. We've been roaming around the Middle East in overdrive for the past 20 years. The Taliban has more power than they did when we started in Afghanistan. And if we're going to sign a peace agreement, it's going to be with the Taliban in power. Iraq is in shambles. We see this now on a daily basis. And now they're in between the United States aggression and Iranian aggression. And now we're going into Iran. Hopefully not. Hopefully not. But it's quite possible. And what's the end game? And nobody knows. So that gets me going. So are we fed up yet? And it's not just with the Federal Reserve. It's with a whole host of things. Just to let you guys know, I will not be doing a podcast tomorrow. And I will probably not be doing a podcast on Sunday evening for a week ahead segment. I hope to be back on Monday. But that's still up in the air as well. But I'll definitely be back on Tuesday, but hopefully Monday as well. Something else here, this is sort of off the cuff and completely irrelevant to this. But I have, obviously some family and friends who listen to the podcast and all that stuff. And my mother has a question. She said, you should ask questions. You ask rhetorical questions, and sometimes you ask an outright question of the audience and to share those comments. And of course, I always want questions of me or comments. I truly do love hearing from everybody. But she said, you can have a question of the day or something that you try to get comments up or something like that. I said, yeah, I guess I can do that. And any example, or did you have? Well, she does. She has an example, but it has nothing to do with what we talk about here. The example she gave me was something about a baked potato versus a mashed potato, and how a baked potato turns into a mashed potato and it disappears or something like that. She's confused. I don't know what's going on, so I'm trying to help her. No, I'm kidding. Here's the serious question, though, because I'll do this. I'll do a question of the day. Potatoes, okay? You got a baked potato, you got 4 people, you got 4 potatoes. All right? Simple enough. But if you're going to try to feed those same 4 people mashed potatoes, the recipe is going to call for 10 potatoes. So why do you need 6 more potatoes? What's taking place in that pot? How are they disappearing? If anybody has an answer, please let me know, because my mother will ask me this question again. And she needs to know, because I need to know, because I don't want to be asked this question again. Serious question. Help me out. Do me a favor. Enjoy your weekend, everybody. Love you, Mom. I asked the question. Enjoy your weekend. Stay safe. Hopefully there's no breaking news that's doing any damage anywhere around the world this weekend. And it's just peaceful, and we can make some progress towards peaceful and fruitful negotiations. So enjoy yourselves. Enjoy the warmer weather we're supposed to have. And I'll catch you back on Monday or Tuesday of next week. Stay diversified, stay vigilant, and stay with the Capital News. I am Alex Kreitis. Godspeed.